Hi, everyone. Welcome to our special Friday live stream here on Eric's channels and our Third Stage channels. We're broadcasting on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, all our favorite social media platforms. And I'm really excited for today because we have a special panel of our Digital Stratosphere 2022 speakers. So we're going to kind of provide a preview, a little teaser into what we'll be talking to at the event. So first things first, I'm Kyler Cheatham, Global Marketing Director here at Third Stage, and I am joined by a plethora of our experts here. So I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, kind of let us know their specialty, as they'll be covering a bunch of topics at our Digital Stratosphere 2022 event. Just some logistics to start. If you could just pop in where you're viewing from today, we'd love to kind of get to know our audience a little bit better. And then also our Digital Stratosphere event will be hosted on February 8th through 10th. It's a completely virtual event and it is completely complimentary this year. We have 3 days packed with great speakers from both the Third Stage team and some of our great sponsors. So if you can head over to stratosphere2022.com or wherever you're watching, the link should be in our description. So from there, we will turn it over to Eric, who is probably our most well-known panelist here. So Eric, want to give us a quick intro for all of you that don't know Eric?
Sure. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting, and I've been doing ERP and digital transformation consulting for about 25 years now. And most of that time has been spent doing technology agnostic, independent consulting. So I'm glad to be here today.
Excellent. And also you forgot big influencer in the ERP space and digital transformation space. So thank you for joining us. Eric will be kicking off each day of our Stratosphere conferences. So let's head over to Theresa Richardson.
Hello, how are you? My name is Theresa Richardson and I'm a manager with Third Stage, and my focus is on operational excellence, process optimization, and OCM. I've worked in a lot of industries from healthcare, automotive, wealth management, IT, obviously, logistics, and I love what I do. It's a passion of mine. So, hello.
Hello,
Awesome.
and you're good.
Yeah, and Theresa always has the best energy. So her topics, she'll be joining us a few times and we'll be on a few panels as well. And she is, I think, covering the most broad range, and she's on our business intelligence panel. And then also we'll be doing a keynote on organizational change management. So definitely a jack of all trades there. So let's go over to one of our directors of strategy and transformation here, Braden.
Yeah, hi everybody. Braden Gerbig, director with Third Stage. Going to be talking a little bit about supply chain. I imagine we're seeing a lot of activity around quote to cash and some of the integration challenges related to the supply chain challenges we encountered last year, and I'm sure more to follow this year. But I've been in consulting 20 to 25 years in various systems, but also operations. So looking forward to chatting more about supply chain.
Excellent. Yep, definitely our operations specialist there, and is going to solve all of the global supply chain problems. Right, Brandon?
No pressure.
No problem.
Yeah, right. And last but certainly not least, we have Christy Barber, who is our small business specialist, has a very diverse background. So Christy, if you don't mind giving us a quick intro to what you do here at Third Stage.
Yeah. So my name is Christy Barber. I'm help with mostly small business side of helping prep for your implementations, getting ready for selections, all of that. I have a strong background in finance. And then I've worked predominantly in manufacturing distribution areas, but then a variety of industries, kind of anything from retail to get really, really technical when we're doing a lot of classified stuff for the government like NASA.
Absolutely. And Christy comes from a family and herself of entrepreneurs, so really helps our small businesses kind of see a holistic view of their digital transformation and just overall business consulting opportunities. So excited to have everyone with us today. So I wanted to share kind of just what everyone will be talking about. So we have top supply chain management strategies that Braden will be covering on day one. Theresa will also take us through organizational change and why that really is the key to transformation success. And then creating and managing our target operating models. We'll have some business intelligence there. And then scaling for growth. Christy and one of our excellent PMs and senior managers, Amanda, will take us through some small to medium business mid-market best practices. So that's kind of what we're talking about today. So I think we're going to kick it off with just going to you, Theresa, because talking about organizational change. And I think that's a good kind of foundation to set our conversation. So do you want to kind of give us a little insight into why you feel like that's something that is so specific for businesses to really focus on within a digital transformation in 2022?
Sure. So I think I'm going to get a plaque because I've said this like 10,000 times. Unless your process is like 99.9% automated, people are involved in what you do. So a lot of times, the focus is on the ERP implementation, it's technology, it's software, but someone's behind the software. There's a process behind that software. And if we don't take that into consideration to understand, where are we currently at, what's our current state, and then you have your future state, everything in the middle is the transition. So if all of those pieces are not considered and discussed, and we don't bring the team in to be part of that solution, in addition to the technology solution, you're going to miss an opportunity for buy-in. So people don't go out and they don't spend, a lot of money for an ERP and expect it to fail. They want it to work. And if you don't include the people behind the technology and in doing the process, you're going to miss an opportunity for buy-in, which impacts your adoption and usage rate. So to me, that's a cornerstone of what we need to talk about in terms of these implementations.
Yeah, and I'm curious as to your take on that, Christy, because I assume a lot of our small business community, organizational change can kind of fall into that nice to have category, but a lot of times we don't have a ton of capital, budgets are tight. And how do you explain to your clients that it really is something that is a main pillar or core deliverable within their project?
We try to bring it in from the start. So even if it's not scoped into the project or whatever, we're still trying to help navigate that along the way and showing each of the clients that come in of, hey, this is something that's a change issue and it could be mitigated by doing X, Y, Z. Is that something where you can find some budget and we can put together, something that would work specifically for them that stays within that. Whereas Theresa, you're seeing companies that they have the budgets to do that. And so they have a full program going where we just have to take that and scale it back and try to help show the value that comes from it.
Absolutely. Well said. And I'm curious, Braden, from a supply chain standpoint, what is kind of the people or organizational change role in supply chain? And is that something that should be a main consideration within those strategies?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, when we're talking about transformation as it relates to supply chain, we're talking about a number of systems in the value chain that are going to affect change within the organization. So that means that some of those frontline processes will change, how they're receiving information and then reporting out on that information. And as you know, on the supply chain challenges that we've experienced recently, the more information, the better. We're getting at a more detailed, granular level in terms of trying to understand where the challenges are delaying processes, delaying inventory, all the logistics that go into it. So it really starts at that planning effort and getting into understanding the integration from the quoting all the way through to production and inventory management. And then everything going out the door and being able to track from the time it leaves the door to the time it's received. So there's a number of systems that are impacted, and then the people that are using those systems experience quite a bit of change during a transformation or ERP implementation.
Yeah, kind of going back to what Theresa said at the beginning of this conversation is there obviously is a human side to every sort of business process or supply chain in this case. And I'm going to go over and get Eric's take on this in just a second, but I want to remind our audience that if you have specific questions for our panelists, go ahead and pop that in whatever comments you're looking at, whether it's YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, anything like that, and we can actually see them here. So this is a live Q&A and we can ask them. We'd also love to hear, what do you want to hear at Digital Stratosphere? What is something that you're very interested in within these topics? So definitely looking for some engagement from our amazing audience there. But Eric, I wanted to go over to you and talk specifically about your content that looks at kind of digital transformation within the 2020s and trends that we'll see there. And from this perspective of talking about supply chain and people, a main trend I assume that you might look at is something like labor shortage, and how do you identify and evaluate those issues as a business. So I wondered if you could kind of share some of your take on that.
Yeah, so one of the things I'll cover is labor shortages and human capital management overall, just sort of a broader emphasis in recent years on human capital management, which was a trend that was already in play, but with the pandemic and now supply chain shortages, labor shortages, it's just emphasizing or re-emphasizing the need for better human capital management, attracting and retaining the best possible talent. So that is one of the things that are being fueled by the current environment we're in right now. That I'll cover.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously very front of mind for a lot of our clients. And I kind of want to go back to you, Christy. You're always the one where I'm like, what's happening in the, because I assume labor shortage must be something that you might touch on in your content when scaling for growth. And what does that kind of look like for some of your clients? Is that something that they're kind of coming up against within 2022?
Yeah, they are. And similar to what we talked about in our podcast last week, the smaller businesses are starting to see they can't hire people to fulfill the jobs that need to be done. And I've seen this with a handful of clients where they can't find good talent. They can't find people that want to stay. They'll come, maybe stay for a couple days, a week or two, and then they leave the company, even though they have good pay, all of that. And you're seeing more and more companies trying to find a piece of technology to replace what a person could do. And it's good and bad. And you see that at restaurants where you go to a kiosk instead of talking to a person. And what is that going to look like from a small business side where that's expensive to do? And how are they going to fight, technology versus human capital in a way of bringing that in? And so I don't know, I've seen a lot of clients, they're just struggling with it. And then the cost too of, I need good talent, but can I afford to pay for, 2 times the amount of what somebody should have? So then you start getting onto the financial side.
Absolutely. And I'm curious, Theresa, your kind of look on that from a business process side. How do your business processes change with all of this kind of turmoil and uncertainty in the marketplace? And how can you make sure that you're planning for uncertainty, if you will?
So one of the things that just popped in my head, and excuse my eyeballs, they always go up in the air when I'm thinking. So I'm not crazy, guys. I'm just thinking. But one of the things that popped in my head when Christy and Eric were talking is how do you show your team value, right? People don't come to work to do a bad job. They want to be involved. They want to, be part of the solution when things are changing. The most dangerous thing that could happen within a company or the culture is when you hear silence, right? If you don't get that feedback, or if you don't have people coming to you with, solutions, that's when it becomes dangerous, in my opinion, because they don't feel like they're valued or part of that process. Some of the best companies I've ever worked for had the engagement and then interaction with everybody on the team to say, how can we make this better? I don't think there's anyone in any company that's smarter than anyone else. Everyone has their own perspective and what they can share. So if you can capitalize on that, and that's a lot of the change management and the process optimization, if you can pull them into what you're doing and how you're doing it, you're going to be a lot better off, right? When you get the silence, that's when you have a problem. That's when people aren't giving their ideas, or they don't want, like, okay, I'm done. They're probably looking for another job. You're in trouble. So I would say, although we have a lot of challenges now, the best thing a company can do is to really start investing in their people. Even asking an opinion is helpful. I mean, how many people walk around feeling like they're not valued and not heard? If you can tap into that, you've just gone a long way. So,
yeah, were you a therapist in another life, Theresa, or
what?
were you a therapist in another life? Or
I tell my husband I used to be a race car driver because I'm just like, but he doesn't believe me. But I just value people. I value people. I value their opinions, and I think I get a lot of information that other people don't when you take that perspective. Things don't because they break. There's a reason, and if you're not asking the right person, then you're in trouble.
Absolutely. I think that's so important as we go through this so great resignation, and really building that company culture so that people want to, and you can have that retention initiatives. Absolutely. So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about some technologies. We've kind of been looking at the people side, and I wonder if we can go to the technology side. And I wonder if I could go to you, Braden, and it seems like a trend that we've been seeing in the industry is focusing on more best of breed systems for things like supply chain management, as opposed to a core ERP system. Is that something that you've seen or that you plan to kind of cover from the technical side within your content at Digital Stratosphere?
Yeah, we see it quite a bit, actually. It's not uncommon to look at the at various points in the value chain, looking at quoting system, for example, or warehouse management system, or specifically at MRP. These areas are all very detailed in nature in terms of the unique aspects of each client. And so they want the systems to reflect that nature. So existing reflection of existing process, and there is a lot of tenure at a lot of our clients, folks that have been there for quite a long time. And so there's that knowledge management component and how that translates into a system. And so sometimes the way that we've always done things is difficult to fit into an ERP. And so that's where best of breed does come in. You can use best of breed in a lot of cases to shore up a legacy strategy or try and improve a system for the near term as you look to a longer term solution. And this applies typically at the larger levels. So the tier one vendors that we're used to seeing, you might have some stop gaps in getting to that next level. So yeah, best of breed is extremely important, and it helps evolve the technology in an environment where we do have a lot of very mature processes in some cases.
Absolutely. And I definitely want to expand on that. We do have a question from the audience that I think is a good one for maybe Braden and Eric. So we have one of our users on our YouTube channel is asking about an integrated solution for textile manufacturing and supply chain processes in Bangladesh. And he had said that his challenge is that he's failing to find a solution, failing to find a solution provider from Europe or the US or from anywhere that has a proven solution for the textile sector. So I think this is a great piece that we'll actually cover in our emerging markets that our VP of our new Africa office, Clifford, and then our other director of transformation and strategy here at Third Stage will cover. So definitely make sure that you attend that session, the emerging technology session. But what do you do when you're in an area or maybe a marketplace where you're not finding the best technology or any technology options, or even maybe support teams, system integrators, consultants in that? So it looks like we're asking about the textile industry here. So I think probably let's go to you first, Eric, as I know you've been kind of talking about these emerging markets and new verticals, and get your feedback on this question.
Yeah, so I think there's a few different options. I mean, first of all, you have your like Braden was talking about, the best of breed options. So perhaps you find technology that can handle the manufacturing component of textile manufacturing, but it doesn't handle some of the other needs that you have, in which case maybe you need a different supply chain solution or a different warehouse management solution to plug some of those. So there's a lot of flexibility and modularity in today's system that didn't exist to this degree years ago. So that's one option, is best of breed. The other option you have is certainly looking out realm of your normal, your usual suspects of software providers. It might be that you look beyond SAP and Oracle and Microsoft and look at some of the more niche focused solutions. And there's a lot of them throughout the world too. The more global we do, the more we find there's a lot of local and regional software solutions that specialize in certain verticals or tailor to a certain market. So there's just a lot of options out there, I guess I'd say. So I'd say explore your options, look at those best of breed and niche options. In worst case scenario, if you have to customize or create some sort of custom solution to preserve the competitive advantage or the specific processes that are unique to you, then that's okay too. That's not the end of the world, even though commercial off-the-shelf software vendors will take a terrible idea because you should be using their software instead, but that's more of a sales message than reality. So that'd be my overall suggestion of options to consider.
Good, and I think that is definitely an important piece of kind of understanding what the options are out there. I wonder if anyone on this panel has textile experience and then might want to chime in.
Yeah, I haven't done a lot of work in textiles, but I will say that, to Eric's point, there are a number of options out there and available. I think the key is going through a selection process that looks in detail at the need, so you can leverage things like best of breed. Also, in technology now with cloud and hybrid options, there's a lot to choose from that you don't necessarily need localization for. However, localization is key in terms of support, and we need to look at that need. In terms of textile in Bangladesh, for example, we need to understand how vendors are supporting in those locations. And that helps in the selection process to understand the SI and how your implementers are available and able to support in a localization instance.
Absolutely. And I know when we kind of go back to the best of breed in collaboration with this conversation, specific verticals, specific areas of the business, those types of things. Christy, I know that you've been seeing kind of that migration to some best of breed systems in the small business or mid-market community. Can you kind of tell us what you've been seeing?
Yeah, it's funny. I just had a conversation with a vendor about it earlier in the week of how they're even seeing the trend as well. And I think what I'm seeing is some of these small businesses have a lot of unique components to them, and they can't just use an ERP to handle all of that. They may need something specifically to purchasing, and they're using an outside technology component for that. A lot for CRM too. They could have already been on Salesforce and they don't necessarily want to come over. It makes more sense to stay with that. And then with maintenance, managing maintenance on their trucks, any type of tooling that they use and is third party, and even with fixed assets as well. Even though ERPs have them, again, they're looking for softwares that can add value in a different way.
So what are some of the softwares that you all have seen kind of in that best of breed area that you've seen your clients interested in, and that's open to everyone?
Well, I think the most common ones are Salesforce, like Christy mentioned, on the CRM side, and Workday on the human capital side, or in some cases financials as well. Those are two of the better known ones, but there's a ton of them out there. But those are just, I think what you're seeing is these upstart. Not that, don't get me wrong, Workday and Salesforce are not upstarts, but they at one point were, and there's other upstarts like them that are sprouting up in a number of different verticals. But you're seeing a lot of solutions like that pop up in the industry that are just giving enterprise buyers more options.
Yeah, and And maybe we'll go to Theresa for this one. Do you feel like having additional options within the marketplace is kind of empowering your clients a little bit more? I know we used to, for the past 10 years, really just work with a kind of a core group of vendors, but now it seems like the client has more options. Is that something that provides, some additional, I don't know, power to the clients to be able to choose something that's best for them?
Absolutely. I'm actually working with a client right now that we've introduced the system that the overall organization feels is best for them to use, but the network that they have is insane. So they're calling people saying, hey, what are you using? Well, we're using this. And so that creates, it does create options, but it also creates another challenge to understand why they don't want to integrate to the new system. So again, it's understanding why they don't feel it is best for them, and why do they feel they need to call their, compadres down the road or what have you, and understanding what is really best for you as an organization. So yes, you have options, but what is the best option is the question. Most efficient, cost effective, et cetera, et cetera.
And it sounds like even, going back to what Braden said, that's really discovered within the evaluation process. So let's kind of talk about the evaluation process. And I'll go to you, Eric. What are the first steps when you're considering going through a digital transformation? You've decided you need a new technology. What's kind of the first step to ensuring that this is going to be successful for you as a business?
Well, the very first step is to work with the executive team to articulate what it is they're trying to get out of this transformation. Too often we get clients, or we talk to potential clients that say, well, we don't really have a purpose or direction other than the fact we have to replace our old systems. And the risk with that is that may be very well a good reason. And for a lot of companies, that is a real reason why they're sort of being not being forced, but they're sort of jumping into this transformation initiative, especially in today's day and age where a lot of vendors are sort of trying to push their legacy customers over to the cloud. That's not enough reason in and of itself. You also need to have a greater purpose of what is it you're trying to accomplish? What are the priorities for the transformation? What do you want to look like at the end of the day on the other side of the transformation? All those are questions that start at the executive level, and that sort of sets the guardrails for downstream evaluation activities, like defining what your business requirements are and prioritizing what those requirements are. You could do that requirement exercise without having done that executive alignment exercise. But when you do that, you're sort of shooting in the dark. You're oftentimes basing your requirements or your perceived requirements based on what you've always done or what the frontline employees think they need, versus making sure it's aligned with what the bigger picture strategy and goals are that the executive team is trying to accomplish. So I'd say that's the first thing, is to have a clear articulation of what the strategy, goals, and objectives of the project are, then getting into requirements, and then you start looking at specific technologies based on those requirements from there.
Absolutely. And what happens, Braden, if I assume that it's much easier said than done, executive alignment sometimes, because everyone has their kind of own goals and agenda. So how do you work as a coach in these situations to kind of help companies or organizations secure that alignment?
Yeah, it's a good point that alignment is a bit of a challenge in some cases, because it occurs at multiple levels. And we try and get the message clear at the top, understanding, as Eric mentioned, the corporate goals and objectives. For example, if one of the goals and objectives is significant growth, then we're looking at a system that needs to be scaled to that growth. And that helps us determine in selection the right fit. We don't want to go with a tier 2 kind of mid-range package when we know that the goal is really to become a much larger organization, and a tier 1 package might be more or a better fit. So understanding those objectives comes in a very simple conversational exercise where we're kind of interviewing, where do you see the company going in the next couple of years? Tell us about the objectives, how you're going to get there, and mapping that out in a way that, it's a discovery process that is very conversational and very guided in terms of the intent of, we're looking to fit a system. So let's dig into what your challenges are. Let's dig into where you have pain points, and that's how we get to a kind of a solidified message that we can then disseminate throughout the rest of the organization, and really get additional feedback at the other levels to match up with that top-down message.
Absolutely. And I think that's such a great exercise that you kind of help discover those objectives. I wonder, for you, Theresa, in that your organizational change, how do you deal with maybe an executive team that's like, oh, we have an awesome culture, we have no need for change management, we'll be totally fine. And, kind of going in and say, well, maybe you do, but this is still a main priority. How do you have that conversation?
You know what? I'm sitting here thinking I'm like a Cheshire cat, because I got this big smile when he was talking. I'm like, wow, do I have some examples for you? So, I think what's been helpful for me is to pull some of those examples out that I've had with past clients, to have their minds thinking like, okay, it's a good idea. Okay, I didn't think of that. And through a line of questioning, it's helpful to have them come up with the idea themselves, so there's more of a buy-in. When you put certain things in front of an executive or a decision maker, and they're like, oh, I didn't think of that, that's a good thing, right? So you don't want your potential future client to fall into the pits of your past clients. Mm-hmm. So it's always, in my opinion, it's always helpful to, when I hear or I see those things, it's a signal to, okay, let's talk about some experiences and ask them some probing questions and get them thinking. And then they're like, oh, wow, I didn't think of that, but that's my idea. That's a great idea. So honestly, that's kind of how I've done it in the past. But to Eric's point and to Braden's point, if you don't ask everybody their pain points, their issues, or their future needs, once that system is purchased and it doesn't solve the problem of other departments or other sectors of the business, you're going to have them go out and look for other solutions like we just talked about prior to. So then you have a new separate problem, right? So it might take a little bit more time, but getting the pulse on the business is so very important from every aspect, in a nutshell.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And I wonder, Christy, from your experience, obviously, in small businesses, we see our client community, they wear a lot of hats, and a lot of them are generational. So it can be, I assume, a bit of a challenge to secure that alignment. How important is that for small businesses, and how do you go through the specific evaluation process?
Yeah, it's really important, especially to your point, when it's family owned and you have multiple generations working, and you see maybe you have 4 generations in your business, and generation 1 and 2 are on the same pace. 3 is like, I don't like any of this. And 4 wants to go do something else. Like, how do you take them all into one room and you get everybody to get on a similar path of where the business needs to go? And that's what I try to do in the executive alignments that I have is, even though we have ideas coming from all different sides, there's some commonality. Let's find the commonality, and we start building from there of what the company wants to accomplish overall. And to your point, Theresa, bringing in some of the change management that pops in on that side, and just heads butting or whatever it looks like, of being able to mitigate some of those risks ahead of time. So then when the project does start, we know very clearly what they are and can track them so they don't blow up on the backside.
100%. Absolutely. And being professionals that we are, I can see them. I'm sure you can see them, those resistant builders, even when you're in the room and you're seeing people, and the people who aren't responding, or the people that have their arms, crossed phone or whatever. Those are clear indicators. Okay, we need to figure out what this is about. So the techniques that we use, we are able to, flesh them out and come up with some solutions to that. So, yeah.
Definitely. I'm so excited to dig into that more because Digital Stratosphere is really where we lay out those actionable tactics. And again, I kind of want to switch gears a little bit to make sure we're kind of covering everything today, because if you've listened to any Eric and my podcast, we could talk about OCM all day long. So I want to make sure we
All we
Teresa would love to.
yeah. So I want to kind of get over to you, Braden, because arguably you have one of the most hot topics that we've seen now become a conversation in mainstream media, in politics, and every piece kind of our culture and global strategy. So when it comes to the supply chain challenge, what are some things that clients or potential clients can do today to take within their controllables, even though obviously there's external factors that they can't control? What are some things they could do today?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's a great question. It differs by every client, by every situation. The challenges are broad and they're also deep. So that, you know, they're not easily solved, but getting better information, getting better detail, you know, at inventory levels, for example. I've seen firsthand quite a few, you know, operations where, you know, inventory is somewhat nebulous in terms of not only where it is, but also, you know, in terms of life cycle of production of parts and pieces, status. You know, things like change order processes become more important because you want to dial in your standard parts and your part lists and everything else. You don't want to have a lot of changes coming in because change creates costs. So, you know, really getting a handle on cost and reducing cost wherever possible, tightening up the inventory, getting a better understanding of your supplier network. All of these things are really extremely important right now. And systems can help with that, but it's also process.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of things that can be done now can be fixed with some exercise on process. And that is a way to step closer to a system and step closer to a new solution. But just working through the manual workarounds right now to get them better dialed in. And then alignment is key as well. You have to have great cross-functional communication right now because the challenges don't slow down. They keep coming. And the only way to fix that is to, you know, have that interaction between teams so that you're getting things done in real time.
Excellent. Yeah, I think those, I'm excited to hear your presentation because you touched on a lot of big things there, like diversification of your vendor network, you know, where are your supply chain, where are they located, distribution in that area. So I know we're going to learn a lot from you in that keynote on day one. Eric, I kind of want to go big and then I'm going to get small, right? So Eric oversees a lot of obviously our global business. And we have an office in Europe. We have one in Asia Pacific, and we just opened one in the Africa market as well. So, Eric, do you ever see specifically with supply chains that they might be, you know, cranking stuff out and doing really well in one area or one location of their business, but there might be some breakage in another area? And how do you secure alignment in that section when you have one person at the table saying, like, we're killing it, we're doing great, and then the other person being like, we can't get raw materials? How do you advise in that overall scope?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So I think you're seeing a lot of that in today's day and age. You're seeing a lot of the supply chain outages are being caused not by mass shortages across the board. They're being caused by one small piece that's cascading throughout the entire supply chain. So, and it might be multiple small pieces, but it's not, in general, it's not that the overall supply chain is breaking down. In many cases, oftentimes it's that I've got, you know, 99% of the raw materials I need, but I'm missing that 1% that's critical. I can't complete my product until I get that 1%. So to your point, even when we look within organizations, we have to think more holistically or completely about the end-to-end process and where the breakdowns might be contributing to failures along the way. And in some cases, like in the case of supply chain management, to build on Braden's point, it might be that we have to change our way of thinking. It's a change in behavior, it's a change in strategies, it's a change in culture in many cases. So now, for example, instead of thinking of minimizing inventory, which has always been, since the 90s, that's sort of been the focus of corporate America and other parts of not just corporate America, but corporations worldwide. Now with the supply chain disruptions, we're seeing the consequences of that. When you run with such a razor thin margin of error, you get one material that's out of stock, and now all of a sudden your whole supply chain is thrown off. So what that's forcing organizations to do is to have better visibility and all the stuff that Braden mentioned, but also just thinking differently about our supply chains as far as stockpiling inventory if we need to, maybe not across the board, but maybe just for critical component materials. So those are just some of the things that come to mind is you have to look at the whole end-to-end process, whether you're looking at a supply chain or whether you're looking at your end-to-end process internally as well. And you have to help define and help people understand how upstream and downstream activities are affected by each step along the way.
Absolutely. That's really interesting. I want to go to Christy really quick and then over to Theresa for the process. But so Christy, what if I'm a small business and I can't buy double the inventory? It's just not in the budget for me. What happens, or how do you advise in those scenarios when really that supply chain tactic isn't just going to work for every single business?
It's hard. And I've seen some people take out lines of credit and they use their whole line of credit to go buy inventory. I had a client that did that last year, and they got a line of credit for $120K and they spent it all on their inventory. And they're able to pay it back enough where the interest compiling on it made more sense than for them to worry about their shelves being empty and they may not have any sales that month. So I think there's different tactics in that way that smaller businesses can utilize to get the inventory they need without it putting a huge financial burden. There's other things they can do. For instance, if you have a supplier, maybe the supplier holds it all for you and you kind of just buy from them as you use it, kind of like a blanket order like some people have, but they charge you a minimum fee to store the inventory. And I've had clients do that also.
Excellent. Yeah, that's great. And I know you'll kind of expand upon all of those within your small business growth talk or keynote and panel with Amanda. But Theresa, since I want to expand on something Braden said, that it seems like there's a lot of key learnings or optimizations you can get from mapping out your business process. So I wondered if you could give us some feedback on how to begin doing that.
Was it the smile that gave it away again? Like, I have one for that one too.
It's really helpful for the moderator because you're like, and to her.
Hello. No, I think it's really important to understand the voices of your business. So in Lean Six Sigma Black Belt, I was trained to look at the different aspects of your business, the voice of the process, the customer, et cetera, et cetera. And when you really understand how those different things are performing, you can target which area to optimize. So if you have a specific area that your performance, your actual is either above or below, depending on what your target is, I need to spend my time here. So especially in the environment today, we don't have a lot of time to figure out what we need to do. So using your metrics, using KPIs, using data to understand what's the biggest bang for my buck is what I would suggest a company do. And then spend some time and some resources really understanding how I can optimize this process. What do I need to do? And also the impacts upstream and downstream. That is so very important, because if I change something without asking Eric, Braden, and Christy, and Kyler, I might have a negative impact to any of those processes you own, and it would be bad for business. So that's why it's important to make sure everyone's on the same page. We're all in the same room. If you own a part of that process, I need for you to understand what my decision's impact is on you. I would start out with KPIs and looking at the voices of the business, but making sure everyone's involved is super important.
Absolutely. And that alignment, we can just keep circling back to that. And so it sounds like, based on what you said, the alignment is not only at the executive level, but there has to be some cross-functional communication. And I'll just open this question up to the group, is how do you make sure that when you are implementing a technology that you really do engage everyone involved in the business? What's kind of the best process to do that?
I'm going to give you a little nugget of information. I think that when you look at that process, and just from my perspective, people don't think change management is, it's a hard thing. It's more, rainbows, bunnies, kittens, whatever. It's really not. Like, when you start talking to people about their interactions in the process and you ask them, how does this impact, or what is your solution? That's your start of change management. Without anybody knowing, that's your start of change management. Mm-hmm. And you can really build on that to help move it along, as long as you're following the protocol and you're understanding, you're including everybody. So I just wanted to throw that out to you because it popped in my head. So
yeah, and that's a good, soft promo for our ground control podcast next week. So if you're not subscribed, you can get our ground control podcast anywhere that you get your podcast. And we cover all things change management and talk a lot about how do you attach business value. And we do some real tangible metrics and some case studies about how change management does truly affect revenue. So thank you for that. A little soft pitch for me to promote our podcast. But
across the room, right?
Yeah, right. Another thing that we're going to talk about a lot at Digital Stratosphere, and we hear a lot in the industry, is software as a service. So looking at migrating to the cloud or cloud technologies, and we see big pushes from vendors to kind of get our clients on that. So I wanted to get your 2 cents, Braden, on kind of what the cloud looks like from an overall logical, I guess, standpoint. So it sounds like a really big buzzword in the industry and everyone wants to go to the cloud, but what are some considerations that you should really kind of, look at as a business when you're considering a cloud solution?
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind is partnership. Anytime you're looking at a cloud system, you want to understand that partnership long term, and because you are signing up for in a lot of cases subscription models and hosted services and things of that nature, you want to understand how they're operating those systems so that you can work within those parameters and you're not locked into something that's not going to be flexible and working for you. So there's a number of considerations. I think I've seen more recently a lot more clients moving to a hybrid model, so cloud and on-prem. That's been beneficial for a lot of growth companies. There's been quite a bit of challenge around some of the legacy cloud instances where we're going back and kind of reworking large implementations into kind of the next wave of upgrades or the next wave of development. Those are challenges that you need to be mindful of as you bring on cloud systems, because they're not easily kind of decommissioned or broken down like on-prem systems can be. So there's a number of considerations that are longer term in terms of the management of the system and how you partner. And so that cultural fit is extremely important. And then also the support models and some of the contracting and some of the negotiations at the beginning of any cloud approach are extremely important.
Absolutely. That right sizing piece, like, is this the right choice, even though you think that this emerging technology is awesome, and the cloud's been around for a while, but the question, it sounds like you're asking, is it right for your business? And that should be the focus. I know our sponsor at Estes Group, Brad Feeks, who's the president over there, is going to be talking about cloud migration strategies on day 3. So definitely tune in. That's his expertise. That's why we brought him on. We don't typically bring on a ton of sponsors for this event because we want to make sure that the content is really authentic and actionable for our audiences. That's our priority. But he does such a great job, if you've seen him on our Ground Control podcast, of explaining that. So we're excited for that. I wonder, Eric, if you can talk about a little bit about kind of the struggle with a software vendor. We've seen lately that sometimes, like for Microsoft Great Plains, for example, that they're sunsetting that system. They've kind of rolled that back a little bit after some pushback. But what is kind of the client's role in that communication, and knowing that the software vendor is going to try to sell you the newest and greatest and sparkliest package, but how can you make sure that you kind of stay grounded as a company in working with software vendors?
Well, I think the first thing is to remember that it's your business and you can't let a software vendor hold a gun to your head and say you need to move to the cloud now because we've moved to the cloud, therefore you have to as well. Because to Braden's point, and to build on some of that, I mean, it is at the end of the day, cloud solutions are generally more expensive in the long term. Software vendors hate when I say that. They argue with me about it all the time, but it's absolutely true. If you have, it's like leasing a car. If you lease a car and you have a monthly payment that never goes away, you never own that car, you're constantly going to be paying on it. That's just more expensive than buying a car. Now you can argue, well, you've got less maintenance, and there's other benefits of the cloud that are maybe non-financial, but you can't go in assuming that you're going to have a lower cost option, because the cloud is going to cost you more. It may be that it's more business value and there's a clear ROI. That's fine. You just have to recognize that the cloud is not going to be cheaper. So those are the two things I'd say: is don't allow a gun to be held to your head. Don't be forced into moving to the cloud just because someone wants you to, or someone else's best interest are for you to go to the cloud. And then really just look at all your options. And Braden had some really good points about hybrid options, and on-premise is not a terrible thing. I mean, I know that's just not cool to say, but on-premise is not the end of the world. And there's certain things that make a lot of sense in the cloud. Like CRM is a good example of a system that just makes sense to put in the cloud. But when you start talking about manufacturing sites at remote locations with unreliable infrastructure, cloud doesn't make quite as much sense in those cases. Or if you're going from a really low cost on-premise system now to a much higher cost cloud option, that may or may not make sense for you as well. So those are just some of the things to think through and to navigate. But again, I think to your point, you have to do this objectively, and you have to sort of sanitize the sales and marketing messaging that you're going to get from the industry, because our industry is very incestuous, I'd say, in that software vendors are financing the system integrators. They're also financing the industry analysts. So if you go to Gartner or Forrester or any system integrator, they're going to have a very pro-vendor message because they're all feeding each other economically. So you just have to recognize the lay of the land and do what's best for your business.
Absolutely. And I think that we kind of went whole circle on, the processes and how really you have to know your processes, know your business back and forth, to know the technology, and kind of that preaching message that we always say is letting the processes lead the technology, not the other way around. And so I wonder from your standpoint, Christy, because I can only imagine, kind of defining processes within a small business community, that it's just like, well, Bob in accounting has that spreadsheet over there that he's used for 35 years. And, we don't really know what's on it. Like, how do you help kind of grow up in defining those processes so you can maybe go towards a cloud solution? But if your, say, data isn't ready for that, or your processes aren't ready for that, it sounds like that would be a big barrier to entry.
It is, and we have to start out with what are best practices, and then start adapting some of the things they do to that to get a foundation, and then plugging in what are the unique things that you may do. So if Bob has this accounting sheet that he's had, it's sitting down with him. What does this accounting sheet do? And taking that information, putting it into a process. So it could be, I get the name, and then I create an invoice manually over here, and then I do this. Okay, so we're taking an order, we're making an invoice from it, and we're sending it out. Something could be as simple as that, but it may be 15 steps with how it's done today, and then we're going to shrink it down to like 5 or 6. And the same thing I'll see with timekeeping. Well, we just pencil up what time we came in, what time we left, and then so-and-so goes and adds it all up. Okay, so let's throw our pencils away, and what are some other technologies that may be a minimal entry point to come in that wouldn't be so expensive for them, but would save a lot of time later on, where that person isn't spending, maybe they're spending 8 to 10 hours a pay period just trying to figure out what the times are. Well, now whatever the cost that person is, I'll have saved it with a technology component that can do that. And so it's showing the value, but then also figuring out what are these little processes and how can we build them out to be something good?
Yeah. So discovering and kind of optimizing and seeing where there's opportunity for technology to enhance that experience. And Theresa, I bet Bob is kind of scared because, that's kind of his wheelhouse, right? So how can, businesses have that conversation of like, well, what do you do? But by the way, relax so we don't get, a really reactionary based resistance.
Yeah, I have no poker face because you read it. So I've been taking notes and just one of the things that jumped out to me when Christy was saying that is optimization does not mean reduction in manpower, right? And I think that's the biggest fear that you have with a lot of people that have their own spreadsheets or their own, workarounds, or this is the way I've done it. They have the false sense of security, like I'm going to keep this and it's going to work. If you can communicate the message of it's not a reduction, it's a reallocation. Like there's a lot of things we can do to help business move forward, be more efficient, be more cost conscious, be more profitable. More profit means what for the business? It means growth. So redirecting the energy, redirecting the conversation from I'm going to lose my job fear to, okay, I'm going to be able to have new opportunities or new responsibilities to replace the old. So I feel like I'm more efficient, I'm more productive. Tap into that and it'll go a long way.
And I think adding to what you said too, it's showing people how valuable they are in other jobs that they can perform instead of maybe just a data entry of plugging numbers in all day.
100%. And that's where you get, quote unquote, the change management growth, the buy-in, the ownership, and the accountability.
And if you don't go, like what Christy said, if you don't go that extra step to define what that future state role is going to look like, it can actually backfire. And then people assume the worst, that their job's going to go away or you're not going to value them anymore. So you have to clearly articulate and define what that is. What is that person going to do with their time now that you've automated half there it is?
Absolutely.
Well said. Well, I think that, is such a great snapshot. And I appreciate all of you that, kind of gave us some insight into what you've been talking about. And, we could talk about this all day here at Third Stage, but I want to kind of circle back around to Digital Stratosphere and ask each of you what you're most kind of excited about, whether it's your own content or another Keynote piece, because we just have such a plethora of variety in there. And just a reminder to our audience, we did post the registration link. Again, the event is completely free, so you can go ahead and go over there and hold your spot. And also for our international audience, the recordings will be available. So say you don't want to join in the middle of the night in Australia. I hear that. Sleep is everything. So you can go ahead and just register and the recordings will be distributed and available for you. But let's go to you first, Braden. What are you most looking forward to, and knowing that you were in Digital Stratosphere last year, and then this is kind of your second year? You're an old pro.
Right. I look forward to the interaction. We always get good question and answer out of events like this, and I think I always appreciate the questions. They always bring good perspective, and for me, that's always valuable in conversations as we work with our clients. So I'm really looking forward to the interaction.
Excellent. What about you, Christy? I think what is this, your like fourth Digital Stratosphere?
Something like that. I feel like the old person in the room. Yeah, same thing to what Braden said. I really like people's questions. It can be things that we haven't thought of to maybe bring into our processes or make a good topic about it for a podcast or a blog, or be able to really hone in on, hey, we're starting to see a trend and it's coming up in these comments too. How do we speak to this? And then I also like what Braden's going to talk about, supply chain, because that stuff just really interests me. Mm-hmm. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Absolutely. What about you, Theresa? This is your first, I think, Digital Stratosphere, right?
I think it's my second, maybe.
Oh, okay.
0.5? No.
We just have you on all the podcasts. We don't even know.
So I love learning new things. Like, I'm never going to profess to know everything about everything. And I think one of the interesting things about this is the variety of topics that you can learn from, right? So I think super cool is the Scaling for Growth, Christy, and the cybersecurity, because I think those two are very important, especially in terms of, and the supply chain, but in terms of the environment now, the business environment now, you have to be able to do both and understand how those impacts what those impacts would have on your business. So I'm really interested in those.
Yeah, absolutely. That cybersecurity is a good call, and the data management as well. We have a lot of really technical people coming to talk about those types of kind of emerging trends, and really you need that right now in today's day and age. So what about you, Eric? You obviously are the brainchild behind Digital Stratosphere and our Stratosphere events as well. So what are you looking forward to this year?
Well, honestly, it's very similar to what the other three are looking for. I can't just repeat that. But I will say that, in addition to, I always learn a ton from the people that join the sessions, whether it's in the questions they ask or the comments they make or both. But I also think what's going to be really interesting about this one is, we haven't done this since, what was it, spring of last year? I can't remember the Stratosphere we did. So it's been almost a year, 9 months or whatever it's been. And so I'll be curious to see just, this content is, to me, most of the content we cover is very timeless. I mean, it's stuff that applies now, tomorrow, the next day. But right now, there are some nuances to what we're covering with supply chain management and labor shortages and other things that are somewhat unique, and things are changing. Other things like change management and other kind of core fundamental stuff is still relevant, maybe even more relevant now. So I think just hearing the content, hearing the other speakers in the context of where the world is today, to me, that's going to be pretty exciting, because I don't remember a time in my career where things have changed this fast, technologically, culturally, socially, all that stuff. So I think that ultimately affects our content as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And just so our audience is aware, we do live Q&A, and it truly is live. The speaker and the moderator, which is usually me, who just pops in and says, like, we have a question from so-and-so. They really do tailor their content to directly answer the question, especially like on Christy's side, our small business folks. We have a lot of change management, a lot of HR audience, and then obviously the supply chain. Everyone wants to know how to fix that. So just from a logistics standpoint, I just wanted everyone to know that. And then I'll share what I'm most excited about. I always learn a lot about emerging technologies. So when we talk about AI, machine learning, predictive analytics, those types of things. And then also emerging markets is kind of new this year for us, and learning about how connectivity affects software solutions, and then kind of niche systems, or creating a network within your area that can kind of support you if that might not be something that you've considered before. So I'm excited to see those new things on our agenda, and our sponsors that will join us. That really is their bread and butter. That's what they do every single day. So having that subject matter expert in things like ERP Cloud will be such a huge asset. But just a reminder, you can head over to stratosphere2022.com to register, and you'll see Theresa, Christy, Eric, and Braden all on the agenda. And we are excited, obviously, if you can't tell, to have you this year. And it's definitely something that is a main driver for our year to come. So set those strategies, register, and make sure to join us. But thank you, Eric, Theresa, Christy, and Braden, for giving us some insights today.
Yep.
Bye.
Thanks.
Yeah, you bet. You have a great weekend, and we will see you just in a few weeks.
Sounds good. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.